So, welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with founders and leaders on some of today's top marketplaces. So, this is episode 67, which is a really great group chat that we just had with Jordan Huck, who's the CEO of Notch. So, if you're not familiar, Notch is a SaaS-enabled marketplace that simplifies supply chain and ordering for restaurants. It's quickly scaled to being used by over 1,500 restaurants and has raised over 19 million from some top investors. So this is a really great chat that we just had where we got to learn more about Notch and the problem that it's solving for both restaurants and suppliers. We did a deep dive into it as a SaaS enabled and also B2B marketplace, and then had a really great Q&A for those that were on the group chat. So you're really going to enjoy watching this chat with Jordan until the end. So Jordan, welcome to the group chat. It's definitely great to have you join us here today. So it's not every day that we get to jump into SaaS-enabled marketplaces and B2B specifically, which is quite the topic. So I'm really excited to do so. But I think a great kind of starting point for us would be to start with a little bit more on your background for those that don't know you.
Sure. Yeah. And guys, thanks so much for having me today. Really appreciate everything you guys are doing in the community. So it's great to be here. So I actually spent 13 years prior to running a marketplace business. I actually scaled a technology services company. And so we made money the whole way. It was not venture backed. And it really gave me some great perspective, right? It was B2B technology services, meaning if I'm a bank or a telecommunications company, I can purchase technology services from a service provider, like us. We had a great run with that company over a 13-year period, scaled it from 20 million up to 250 million, ended up selling it in 2016, worked to earn out until 2018. So just a great run. And over that period, we actually invested in a labor marketplace, right? We were a technology staffing company. We invested in a marketplace company that, in theory, existed to disrupt the model that we in fact had. Now, it didn't end up getting to scale, but certainly gave me kind of the perspective of just how much opportunity there is to bring B2B commerce online, right? If you're a consumer, everything you do, you expect to be able to go on and have just instant connectivity to make decisions. And so, I really believe, and I'm dedicating my life now to Notch, that B2B commerce is going to follow.
That's quite the experience, and kind of insights into the world of B2B and marketplaces specifically. Yeah, so I'm curious to learn more. What led you to joining the Notch team?
Sure. Well, like anything, I had a great relationship with the seed venture capital firm, specifically in Toronto, that it invested and. And it was actually ChefHero at that time. It was kind of at this inflection point, right? Where, hypothesis was we've got a huge industry that's offline and there's a big opportunity here, kind of bumping into some scale challenges, some execution challenges. As I came in and really got to understand the space, and I've worked in restaurants growing up and really, got to understand the size and scale of the problem, right? So, when a restaurant procures from a wholesale food distributor, that's a $390 billion industry in North America, 6 trillion globally, right? So now it's still offline because of the incredible amount of nuance and challenges that exist. And we'll talk about that today. B2B marketplaces aren't for the faint of heart, but so just an incredible opportunity to, help bring an industry online that's still operating with, paper checks and in some cases still faxing orders. So, I did my diligence and really learned that this was a huge problem. Somebody's going to solve it. It's going to be us.
So yeah, certainly a large problem. So yeah, so what is like that kind of like status quo? Like prior
Sure.
to Notch, like what is that challenge that they're facing,
Mm-hmm.
and like what are the typical ways
Sure.
that they would go
Sure.
about?
So if you're a restaurant in any major city across North America or the globe, and you're at any sort of scale, right, as a restaurant, so you're multi-location or you're a good-sized restaurant, when you go to discover a wholesale distributor, and you don't do that a ton, it's not a high switching category, but when you go to discover, that's offline. When you go to procure, so you're managing, if you're a restaurant group, let's just use Toronto, you've got 16 different purveyors, meat, seafood, produce, dairy, alcohol. All of that procurement comes offline, okay? 2/3 of your business is online though, right? You've got a point of sale system that's online. You're tracking inventory online. You've almost certainly got third-party delivery at the front of the house. When you get to actually managing and procuring amongst these relationships, that's completely offline. And then if you're a distributor, so a wholesale distributor, the way you receive orders, so your order desk completely offline. And then it gets really interesting when it comes time to accept and receive payment. You actually, if you're a wholesale distributor, you will drop off a paper invoice. You've typically given out terms 30, 45, 60 days. And then you're counting on that restaurant on day 31 to cut you what's called a push payment, meaning like, I have an invoice, it's time to push out a payment. It's time to push out an EFT or push out a check and so the moment of discovery, and again, I reiterate, because it's a very important nuance about B2B marketplaces, right? And just the type of marketplace you're running, if discovery is the value proposition or if it's something else. I'm sure we can dive into that. But from the moment of discovery to the point at which you cut a check, or excuse me, ideally you don't cut checks, to the moment you issue payment against those goods that you purchased, that's completely offline. And so Notch exists. So that's incumbent, right? That's incumbent, situation today. So 90% of the time we run into the clipboard. We certainly have a couple competitors that I don't know if we're going to dive in the competitive set, but we have a couple competitors out of Europe trying to tackle this space. But, really it's category creation, right? Like we're educating our restaurant groups and distributors that, hey, we've built a B2B e-commerce product for you, Mr. Distributor, for you to bring your operations online. And we've built you a product, a SaaS product on the restaurant side to bring your procurement online and manage all these relationships.
That's definitely quite the challenges that they're kind of facing. So, as I think it'd be helpful for some context, if you could maybe just kind of like break down Notch as as a business
Sure.
kind of overall.
Sure. Yeah. So, and you don't typically, explain it. I mean, obviously this is a marketplace specific community, so you can get into the nuances of like a SaaS enabled marketplace. I don't, typically, because a lot of people will look at you like, huh? But
Yeah,
essentially
we can go deep into the into the specific aspects of it as SaaS enabled for sure.
So we would be a SaaS enabled marketplace, meaning we have SaaS products. So we've actually got SaaS products on both sides, and I'll tell you why we did that in a minute. But we've essentially built a software product on the restaurant side that allows them to manage, invite their current, and this is an important nuance, invite their current supply chain. So what we call bring your supply chain online. So if you've got 16 different wholesale distributors, you can bring them online. Your ordering is now, so think of it as a central hub for procurement for everything that you purchase from a restaurant perspective, meat, seafood, dairy. And so, from that product, you are able to procure. We've also built integrations from that product into the existing technology stack on the restaurant side. So, when someone comes into a restaurant in New York City, they order something with a tomato, inventory goes down when an order gets placed in the point of sale. When an invoice comes back from Notch, it replenishes that par level, right? So we've brought that component online. Those invoices will flow into an accounting system, taking away that headache for the restaurant side. And then, we've got a product called Notch Pay where I can automate my payables. So if I'm a restaurant group, 30 locations, I can now automate my payables. I can now automate the administration and the, instead of cutting checks, 9 different locations, hundreds and hundreds of times a month, I can automate those payables through Notch. And then, so again, I'll go to the distributor side SaaS product in a second, but it's not that we wanted to have to build SaaS. It wasn't like, hey, let's have to build 2 standalone, but you're just, never, so specifically around B2B marketplaces, these businesses are using your product as a core component of what they do. And you're not going to be able to get by on a, without something significant, right? A SaaS product that can be used as their central hub for procurement. So in our markets where we get to density, so density is very important for us because we have to create network effects regionally versus like a Fair, right? That can do it across, look up to Fair greatly, right? Incredible marketplace business versus Fair that can do it irregardless of geography. We have to build density in a specific city. We layer on our marketplace offering as we get to density in a market. So if you're a restaurant and you're adding something to your menu, because we had to really understand the mind of our users on the restaurant side before we could build the right product. If I'm adding something to my menu, well, we've built 100,000 SKUs, on our products, and you can go on and discover a new distributor. And when that happens, we get a traditional marketplace take rate, right? A revenue share. Okay, that's the restaurant side. On the distributor side, so if the problem on the restaurant side is that my procurement is offline, the corresponding problem that is insanely painful, and we hear it time and time and time again on the distributor side, is that my order desk is offline, right? So the way in which I accept orders comes from fax, telephone, email, text messages. I pay an employee to stay up 2 a.m, listen to voicemails from chefs who've had some drinks after their last shift, right? I check those voicemails and I then place those orders into a fragmented set of systems. So QuickBooks Desktop, QuickBooks Online, Sage, SAP. We run into verticalized SaaS products, Produce Pro, right? Things specific to certain verticals. And so we built a B2B e-commerce product where we integrate. So that product integrates into their backend, into their existing technology stack. And now they've got online ordering for all of their restaurants. Okay, so we bring your order desk online. And then, so 3 main use cases we facilitate with that product. So 1, I now bring my order desk online and they pay us a subscription fee for that. So I've got online ordering. They don't pay us a commission when their existing buyers place an order to them. That would never fly in a low margin business such as this. I'll talk about how we can monetize that in a minute. So they invite their buyers. They also can get introduced to new buyers, right? I talked about our marketplace offering at scale. In that case, we get our 7% take. And then they can also use Notch Pay. So for the first time in history, they don't have to rely on manually hoping that someone's going to cut them a check on day 30. They can use our product Notch Pay to automatically pull the monies that are outstanding to them on day 31 or 45. We've partnered with a fintech company that we also do lending. There can be receivables factoring as well. So I can get paid instantly, based on the outstanding receivables. All this to say, so that was a lot. What do we do? Like Notch's solution, we exist to bring B2B commerce online in this segment. Whereas some marketplaces, B2C, unlock like latent supply, right? Like if I'm an Airbnb, I unlock latency. That's not us. And we exist to make the existing offline transactions more efficient. So we got to bring it online to get to liquidity, and then new transactions can occur via our marketplace.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a lot that we're going to jump into about that. Yeah. So how did you initially, think about kind of bringing those transactions online and kind of, becoming the centralized hub, of course, is, the longer term kind of vision, and also to kind of where you're at today. But like, how did you start with that?
Sure. We didn't start with that. So when I took over the business, so the previously it was ChefHero. And so when I took over the business, we just, the pandemic hit, went down 80% in April of 2020. And we really just spent time listening. And so the previous model for this business, we had well, there was definitely software built, but really weren't standalone SaaS products on either side. And essentially our model was, and it's no one's mistake, the team was learning and iterating, and that's how it works, but it was a mistaken pattern match off the B2C marketplace, meaning we built online stores for distributors. And the only monetization model was if you bring restaurants, like we'd say to the distributor, well, we're going to bring you new restaurants. So you'd approach a restaurant group in Toronto and they've got 16 different distributors. And you'd say to them, well, we have a produce distributor and we'd say, the only way you can use our product is by switching. So let's just think about that for a second. I'm a restaurant. I have 16 different distributors. Are you telling me I can only use the Notch product if I switch all 16 of my distributors? How likely do you think that is to happen? 0. So that's not the problem, right? We were solving the wrong problem. We had built a product strategy that just facilitated discovery and switching. The way if I come on, I've got lots of people that work for us from Uber Eats. I use this as an example, a lot of apologies, but like I go on to Uber Eats, I eat Thai today, I want to switch tomorrow, right? Like I want the most expansive array to constantly be doing switching. And that's not the problem that we solve. So when we really understood, and so that's why we rebranded the company, right? It really reflects the problem we solve. It's not just the new aesthetic. So once we understood that, it drove everything, and then things started to work from there.
And then, yeah, that's super helpful. So what was the kind of time, like the time period of that, just for some context for us?
April 2020. So let's say, been a fun time for all of us during the pandemic, hasn't it? What is that, 15, 16 months? You lose track. It's been to build out a full SaaS product on B2B e-commerce product on the distributor side. It was a full. So here's how we thought about the business. It was a full 12 months of like button down the hatches. We did layoffs. We're down 80%. Like build software, focus on having the right model. And then we've significantly accelerated over the last 4 months, ramping up our go-to-market teams and hired in the US, launched Texas as we come out of the pandemic, right? Sort of catching that rebound.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about the pandemic and how that kind of impacted the business. So that's great. We just kind of touched on that. So you did mention new market launches. So I would love to learn a little bit more about how you think about launching new markets and what all is involved in that.
Sure. Perfect, because I've got scars. We've done it the wrong way, and now we think we figured out how to do it the right way. So we worked really hard. So like I came in, having operated before, I think about distribution 80% in product. Then I have a really strong product, kind of like my co-founder, really strong near Gazette beside me. But I think about distribution a lot, right? And in a highly fragmented industry like restaurant side, like, are you gonna have to go after each one of them one by one, right? Like that's going to be a long slog. You look at companies like Fair that have just really nailed that ability to get that referral flywheel going. And so we have a working flywheel where distributors invite their restaurants to order to them via our order desk product, right? Hey, I invite all my restaurants because I want them to order online. And then our team can approach those restaurants and say, do you want to bring the rest of your supply chain online? Because we don't solve the problem until you bring all your procurement online. So we attempted to launch new markets with that distributor first approach. Does that make sense? Am I being clear there? Where it's like distributor for restaurants.
Yeah, no, it certainly does. Yeah.
Okay. The problem with that is we learned pretty quickly. We're very clear on our ICP. Like sorry, I say that like that's easy. That took us a lot of pain and a lot of money. Like some distributors service restaurant groups that have 8 locations, right? And that's the perfect ICP. We tier them out. Like that's the perfect user for our product. But sorting through the TAM on the distributor side to make sure they're referring. So we'd launch distributors in a new market and they'd refer like gas stations. And we'd be like, oh, we got a problem here. So the way we think about our flywheel now and the way we launch markets is we don't even start with marketplace. Like marketplace comes at density, period. You flip a marketplace. We start with a standalone SaaS. So this is that chicken and egg, right? This is a marketplace community. This is classic chicken and egg single player mode. Like here we go, SaaS product on the ground first for restaurants, because we can very clearly identify our tier ones, right? The restaurant groups that are fit for us. So we go after restaurant groups. They invite their supply, right? They invite their distributors. We build them online stores, but those distributors are only accepting orders for just that restaurant. We then have a team that approaches those distributors to say, you know, if you'd like, you could flip your order desk. And so by doing that, that took us, so I'm saying that like, it's a lot of knocks to get to that conclusion, and a lot of stress from marketing. But that ensures that we're staying in our white hot center the whole time. It's like restaurant group that's a good fit invites distributors that are a good fit. Well, they'll work with other restaurants that are a good fit. So they flip our ICP, they flip our ICP, and that's how we see those referral loops work.
Got it. Yeah, that might sound confusing to some, but I know here in the marketplaces community, we definitely get that as a flywheel.
I wouldn't go deeper. Yeah. Here we can get into that. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, you know, bringing kind of like both sides online, right? So I'm kind of curious, you know, with bringing those both sides online, and then you did kind of mention like at some sense of density, the kind of the marketplace kind of element kicking in. So like what does that density look like? And is it from, I'm assuming from like a localized kind of approach or?
Yep. Yeah, the reality, so it's that tipping point, right? Where there's enough demand and there's enough organic kind of searches outside of their existing supply chain where it's time where you can, you know, distributors can start to count on some income stream from us. We haven't identified. So I'll tell you right now, we have not codified that exact point. It's tipped in Toronto where the data shows us there's enough. So that was our home city. You know, we see enough organic searches and we see enough activity where people are organically searching the marketplace to know that distributors can, you know, to know that distributors can count on a revenue stream from our product, but we haven't found it yet in new markets, right? That's what we're searching for. We know it's much more density than we have today, put it that way, right? So, and that's one of those really, really critical points that we gotta figure out.
Got it. Yeah, and then you did mention too previously, as far as, you know, Notch Pay, right? So that's another kind of value add, you know, to kind of be on the platform. So, you know, is that something that kind of is like an additional kind of product or some kind of like functionality that the I'm assuming the distributors can use, or is that kind of like baked into the SaaS offering?
Yeah, so the distributor will pay us a and so for all the fellow founders, we've gone with getbalance.com, who I think is the one that made this introduction into here. So and so they exist to tackle the use case. When I met the CEO, he's like, Jordan, I founded my company for you know, people like yourself that are trying to solve this problem. They exist for B2B payments. And so essentially it's optional, right? Like it's optional for that distributor where with this technology, they can customize the checkout setting on a per buyer level. They can say, hey, I want this buyer to be able to see these checkout options. And they can have a checkout offline button, right? Like they can say, I want to pay by check. So I'm physically going to remit a check, but we're working to educate them that, you know, we can bring down their DSO, their days sales outstanding for the receivables by 35%. Credit cards, they're paying 2.75% on credit cards we can get them down to 1% by accepting ACH or EFT. So it's an optional service offering that's there, but we think about driving a ton of usage with that.
Certainly. Yeah, it's optional, but very compelling with those kind of
We
stuff.
hope so.
Yeah, yeah. So this is quite a bit. You have quite a bit of kind of functionality when it comes to like a product side and kind of bringing both sides online. So as a SaaS enabled marketplace, like what are some kind of metrics or like KPIs that you're focused on?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So for me, like the driving, and again, I think this is just a marketplace KPI. Like at the end of the day, we're building a marketplace, right? And SaaS enabled marketplace companies have to build the SaaS because you have to, like, you don't choose to be like, I want to have to, you have to give enough functionality where people can literally use your product to do procurement for their business. We're in B2B procurement, right? Accepting of orders and sending of orders. Like the average restaurant group spends $17,000 a month and places 36 orders on our product. Incredibly high frequency, large AOV, much lower take rates. You hear those numbers, right? Much, much lower. So again, I think it's marketplace KPIs, which is like everything I understand and know about marketplaces. You want to define product market fit as increasing engagement, right? That's the end all be all. Whereas like when you look at the cohorts, is the engagement increasing over time? And what we were able to identify was that there's a certain segment of restaurants that don't just like our product, they love it, right? You see a 400x increase in engagement. And so obviously the ultimate measure of engagement is net revenue that increases, but we look at all of them, right? Because before I can get to monetization, I want to see, do they place more orders? Does that cohort place more orders? Do they order more individual SKUs? Is GMV retaining? Is net revenue retaining? And you want to see it north of 100%. Whereas tier 3, so for us, that's a segment of restaurants that maybe sometimes they order from a distributor. Sometimes when times are tough, they drive to a Costco to pick it up. Well, we'd see engagement go south of 100. So for me, those are the metrics that drive where we invest and how we build products. So it's not really an answer specific to SaaS enabled. I think that's just a marketplace answer.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you did mention, the frequency in AOV, and that's something that always comes up in our conversations as marketplaces. So yeah, thanks for sharing on that. Yeah, so I'm also curious to learn more about, what is your team size like and kind of the org structure?
Good question. So we've scaled pretty significantly coming out of COVID. So we were probably running at 55. We're up to 75 people here at the company. When you look at org structure, obviously, heavy focus on and really have just scaled up the product side of the organization. We ran really, pretty lean throughout, throughout the pandemic. So it'd probably be of the 75, you've got 25, 25 to 30 in product engineering, and then really have scaled go to market. We've probably got 20 in what we would categorize as sales. Now, we use for go to market to start our flywheel, we use a BDR AE structure. So again, you're actually using a B2B SaaS go to market in a marketplace company, right? With SDRs or BDRs, whatever you want to call them, that are booking demos, and then account executives that are actually in the field. So we do need people that are in the actual field in the markets to bring these restaurant groups online, and then the rest is broken out between customer success and finance.
Yeah, and that's a great mention. Yeah, you did mention being sales driven from like a kind of like SaaS B2B standpoint. So could you maybe share a little bit more about how you like identify and reach out to, and then the sales process as far as for restaurants?
Sure. Um, so we, so again, in order to make our unit economics work, we can acquire a certain segment of restaurants profitably going direct sales. A certain segment has to come through the distributor to restaurant flywheel that I kind of talked about, right? How you can bring CAC down as these warm leads come in. But like just talking about our straight go to market for, when we go out and start this flywheel where we say, okay, new market, go out and acquire direct, go out and directly acquire larger restaurants and restaurant groups. We use an in-house inside sales model that I love shared services. I always try to lean towards the more things I can put at HQ, the better. So, because the more I learned it in my last business, 15 years of it, the more you got to recreate new functions in different markets, the more challenging I think it is to scale. So we've got a centralized inside sales team that can handle and book demos for all markets. I'd be happy with anybody to share any metrics or anything they'd like, certainly reach out to me. And then we need our account executives to be on the ground, to be in front of chefs. We're not a remote business. Restaurants are back meeting their people. And so we'll then send out our team in person, to push those across the finish line.
Awesome. Yeah, I was curious to learn more about the kind of like localized kind of support too on that end, if how much was kind of needed on that. So cool. Well, this is super interesting. I feel like you and I could go on for quite some time. We do have some questions here, and I want to make sure we can get to those. Before we do, though, this is you've had quite the journey and experience building Notch, and it's a very interesting marketplace. So, do you have any kind of like key learnings or kind of tips that you'd like to share with us as kind of early stage marketplace founders?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and again, everyone's going to come at it from their own viewpoint, obviously. And I think for us, and whether we want that narrative to work for us or not, like we really believe that it was COVID that forced us to slow down and I know it's the constant cliche, everyone's saying, gotta get out, gotta get out, gotta get out. But like, we didn't understand what the actual problem we needed to solve until we were physically in distributor offices looking at the stacks of invoices, right? And hearing from people that were getting up at 1 to manually enter orders into QuickBooks Desktop. And so, really understanding that problem that you're solving is just everything. And I know obviously that sounds, well, of course you got to understand the problem that you're solving, but like really being sure. And for a period of time, a lot of smart people at our company weren't sure. Like that's a fact. Like we weren't sure. And so that drove everything. And then you started to feel it, kind of work. And then secondly, and again, I know it's kind of out of the marketplace playbook, but we let ourselves like, specifically for us, where there's so much like staying constrained is just so critical. Like, because there's always the shiny new object, a new salesperson comes in and just like, if anything, we've gotten ourselves into trouble by thinking about the next great feature versus like ensuring that like the core features are really solid. And I had an almost an ideology dispute with some of our heads of product because I thought sometimes misapplying the MVP concept on building product. Like you use MVP if you don't know what to build next, like in consumer social or like, but in B2B procurement, that the integration for QuickBooks Desktop needs to work flawlessly. You don't need the market to tell you that. So sometimes if you misapply that framework, you can get yourself in trouble. So that was a learning for me to be like, when you know the winning product to build, like go all the way.
Yeah, I know that's really great, and I think relatable to quite a few here. And yeah, just on the note of truly understanding the problem, yeah, I would say the the direction with Notch now and kind of the scale you're at is definitely a testament to that. So cool. Hey, we're gonna jump into questions. So Rich, did you want to jump on?
Hey Jordan, how you doing?
How are you,
Um,
man?
Good. I actually built a marketplace in the food industry for the past like 6 months or so. I
Awesome.
dramatic pivot away from it just because of how hard it is. Pretty much everything you mentioned is just exactly what I've been living for the like half of a year. And we were building sort of like the Instacart for the restaurant industry, so more like on-demand deliveries from your restaurant depot or something. That's a segment we thought we could
Got
go
it.
after. We ultimately just hit a giant wall where we couldn't see how we would be like wildly profitable. You know, razor thin margins, very elastic consumers that you're on the other end. How do you think about that kind of like giant elephant in the room, which is how do you make a lot of money off of these types of consumers?
And good on you. Like, that's an excellent question. So we understood like the types of consumers that do want delivery from a restaurant depot are typically the segment that's not perfect for our product, right? And so, I think Cheetah, did you follow Cheetah's model at all? They looked at something similar in the US. So yeah, we had to get very constrained about, so, oh, it's a huge TAM, it's an insanely large TAM. Yeah, that's great. But for us, we can't at this point make money and can't be extremely profitable unless it's really going after a certain segment that will pay us, that will pay us a subscription fee, right? So, we can drive $199 per location from that restaurant group, right? Like the segment below that, we at this point, until we can have the cheapest products on the market, which would come from like potential opportunities to skip the distribution layer and partner with actual manufacturers or until we can provide that level of, hey, we've got the cheapest products on the market, we can't make money from that segment, to your point. So constrained TAM was the only way we can do it.
Got it. And on that point, so are you looking to at some point, you said partner with the manufacturer to get a bigger rate of the, per unit or per order?
Yeah, there's definitely adjacent opportunities where you sort of think about vertically integrating, right? Where you're, then you obviously got to worry about last mile, but like there's all these companies now like Swift in Toronto. And so where you can kind of have, real time, last mile kind of built into your product. For now, I try to keep the team. Definitely we're aware of those adjacent opportunities. For us in the 3 cities that we're in Texas, Chicago, and Toronto, there's more than enough for us to grow a fairly, a meaningful revenue number.
Got it. I've got about 1,000 questions, but Mike, I'll let you.
You can actually go for a. We'll ask. I know you have quite a few. Yeah, and these are good ones too. So go for
Fire
them.
away, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm fascinated by Choco and Reiki because very different approaches to kind of like what you're doing as well. All in the same space, obviously, like software versus physically doing the delivery. What's your thoughts on each of those? And
Great question.
Hard to be like, what is the value prop of each one? I mean, Reiki is more of a directory, creates a list of distributors. Choco is more of a messaging system. Like, what's your take on those two?
Yep. Yeah, that's a great question, man, because I talk a lot. Obviously, Choco just raised a big round, right? So, a very big round, and I've been meeting with the venture capital firm that firms that led the Choco round, right? So sort of like, ooh, okay, here we go. So Choco is a actually very similar business model to Recce. You described it really well, right? So what they've done is, in order to avoid the incredible friction point that we decided to tackle head on. So let me just explain what I mean. So like if you're selling t-shirts on Shopify, you have one price for your t-shirts and you represent those prices for the t-shirts to the entire, your customer base. But that's not the way it works in B2B. You have unique pricing per buyer. So if I'm a meat distributor, I have pricing per buyer across 500 sets of buyers because my sales rep negotiated a different price every time. And so Recce and Choco didn't want to tackle that part of the problem because it slows you down. You have to be able in your product to represent that many permutations of pricing per buyer. So they actually keep themselves out of the money flow on the buyer app, right? If you log on, and I'm sure you have, Richard, right? Like you're not in the money flow. You're placing orders, payments occurring offline. I say this to VCs when like, I know something that the people that back those companies don't, that they're not solving the real problem. Like we have a list of restaurants that we rip off those products because everything else is still offline. The invoices come in, they still have to manually upload them into inventory management, right? I think they're trying to back in, like their play, I believe, is to monetize, like optionally giving the distributors to come back into the money flow. Do you know what I mean? Like you're receiving these chat orders, but if you want, you could use our payment tech.
Yeah.
And so we just think that's the wrong way to tackle the problem, right? It's allowed them to scale. It's not even GMV, it's SaaS flow through, right? I always because they're estimating what the GMV is on these transactions. So our model is more software intensive, but actually solves the real problem. And when we get a restaurant group online, they've never come off in 5 years. Nobody's ever come off.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, the nail in the coffin for us to move away from the industry was I spoke to meat suppliers and I said, what's your thoughts around Reiki? And they just said, I don't need them. Like I have my own lead gen. I have my own deals coming through the door. I'm not going to pay for a lead through Reiki. There's just no need. Like I get referrals every day. And that's when I realized that going supply side and trying to partner with the supply side is actually really hard as well. So I don't know if you've experienced the same, like are you focused on supply side as well? Or?
Yeah, the only way that we, so I was in a distributor's office this week in Chicago. We did a trip there. Like the value proposition is not compelling enough. So man, your insight is dead on. The value proposition is not compelling enough just to say, hey, here you go. Like we've got a potential new lead that might come to you a couple times a month. Never gonna work. It's gonna be a long day at the office. The only way that you can create real value for those distributors is sitting there being like, hey, money talks in this industry. All those credit card fees at 2.75, I can make it such that the 100 buyers that check out only see the ability they have to add their bank account. Now you've brought that down to 1% cost to you. You know, all those invoices that you're manually, you're manually generating, you can use our system to automatically generate them for your buyer. It's all integrated into QuickBooks Desktop. When you make a change in pricing, it pushes to the catalog. When you make an update in inventory, it pushes to the catalog. So your insight's dead on, man. Like I spent some time when we got here where that was our model, was like, we called them marketplace only deals. And they're exactly what they sound like. Hey, you just sit there, we'll build your catalog and just wait. Like no chicken and egg, just like you just wait, and once a quarter we'll try to bring you a new, and it didn't work. That model does not work.
Yeah, I think it was Fabrice Grinder from FJ Labs that said, always focus on the most elastic side of the marketplace. And in this one, it's obviously the restaurant owners. So definitely the right model. And that's actually why we what you were just saying about the financing, when you have such low take rates and there's payment processing fees of like 2 or 3%, that is your take rate. If you can optimize that for the restaurant owner or the payment flow, I think that's a huge opportunity. That's why we pivoted to fintech. Basically, we realized that an area that you can actually solve for, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bessemer put out an amazing marketplace piece. Like, and again, they invested in Choco, but like in B2B, the markets are 10x bigger than consumer, and a take rate between 2 and 7% is exceptional, right? Like, we're dealing with AOV for our restaurant groups of $16,000 a month, right? Like, if we can generate 2%, 2.5%, 3%, you've got a very meaningful business there.
What's your thoughts on buy now, pay later for this industry?
I had a board member send me the Amazon Affirm thing yesterday. I think it's a great idea. I think it's another amazing adjacent opportunity. So it's an incredible thing that I want to experiment with. Whenever we've gotten ourselves in trouble, and I know I've said this a couple times, is like when we lose focus. Like I'm really fanatical right now about, like, because we've raised a big, like, I'm here talking about everything's working. God, not everything has been working here, right? Like, we've raised a non-insignificant amount of capital. Our next round is our B, and we need to be at fairly significant scale, right? Like, 50, 60, 70 million annualized in GMV. So, sorry, that's my little one behind me. So yeah, that's how I think about it.
Cool. Well, really appreciate your insights.
Absolutely.
There's some great questions. Hey, yeah, Jordan, so you did mention, yes, some of your past investors and raising. So I did want to get a question in asking about, what the fundraising journey has been like, because someone asked that in the community earlier.
Sure. I'm not the best person to, so I can certainly give you my perspective, but I didn't raise our original A. I have been here for the 2 follow on, right? So it's kind of like our A's come in 3 tranches to make up that 19 million. The last one coming a couple months ago. For our specific industry, Richard, the question you brought up, the elephant in the room, like even Choco and Recce, who makes this a business? How does this become, how does this become a highly profitable business, is very much the elephant in the room for us in our space. Even people that invested in Choco still not sure. So I very much was looking at GMV as a proxy for product market fit, and now my focus is revenue. Like, this must become a company now, right? There's startup, science experiment, and then business building. And so for me, and for the founders on here and the CEOs, like, the team will focus on what you celebrate and the metrics, like, and so I think about North Star in terms of driving revenue, and like, it's revenue time for us. And so if we're able to do that, because we have GMV, GMV grew 22% in August on a non-insignificant, amount. So, but revenue's got to follow. So if that's there, we think we'll be in really good shape to raise our next round. Awesome.
That's really impressive, the recent growth. So congrats to you and the team on that. So this is a really great chat, and I want to be conscious on time, so we're almost out of time over here. But before we kind of wrap things up, though, I'd love to just hear, like, what's one kind of like a memorable kind of moment in your journey, maybe building Notch so far, that you can share with us.
For me, it's always about team. Like, always about team. We didn't have the right culture. Like, I was in a mature industry business before this, but it gave me great insights about B2B procurement, and team was important. Like, having the right people that were engaged and passionate and wanted to be there, it's 5 times more important than in startups, because like, the only thing you can be sure of is that you won't be right on all your calls, on everything, on GDM, like on go-to-market, and so the right team helps you iterate, because like they understand and know that it's like, okay, like this isn't going to be right. This is going to be right. And we quickly, we're quickly able to adjust and make those changes. So what's been memorable for me is just bringing together a group of people that are just really, really passionate. We attract a lot of chefs, like a lot of ex-chefs, people that with real deep domain expertise, because they've been there to, they've been there to work with the clipboard before. Then the final point I knew, and like Richard, I think this is, man, on your questions, like I think this was, we had a big restaurant group. And remember, before, the problem we thought we were solving was like the switching and discovery. And there was a milk crate that this chef at this fairly famous restaurant would sit on when the invoices come in via paper and manually enter them into his inventory system. And he got a picture with me and him and this milk crate, because he was throwing the milk crate out, right? Because the integrations we built them. And that's when you just sort of know, you're like, I don't know, that's for us was just full 100% conviction on like, okay, that's the problem we solve. And we get rid of the chaos, and then you can monetize. So yeah, that was big for us.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, and definitely a great way to wrap it up on the chat. So yeah, thanks again for taking the time to join us. This was super interesting. We did kind of go deep on with some of the questions, and thanks Rich for the great questions. So last but not least, so time for kind of a quick plug. Where can we keep up with you?
Anybody can reach out to me at any point. LinkedIn, you can reach out at Jordan at notchordering.com. Any questions, please reach out. Marketplace businesses are hard. Good for you guys for bringing this community. Like, that's an understatement. Sorry. Like, that's the understatement of the century. So great that this community is sort of thriving, and anybody can reach out at any point.
Awesome. Yeah, well, we really appreciate it. So that's definitely going to be a great chat, and I know everyone's going to enjoy watching the recording too that couldn't make it. So yeah, so thanks again for taking the time to join us. So we're definitely big fans for what you're building. So
thank you so much. Appreciate that. It means a lot. Bye guys. Have a great day.